The Dallas Cowboys have been hiding some hidden gems, and we finally got to see them all ball out this past Sunday versus the Jets. Today, we talk about each of these guys and why all three of them are going to have a substantial impact on the Cowboys the rest of the way. Welcome to Cowboys Digest, everybody. I'm Jace Andrews. I appreciate you tuning in to today's show. Have lots to discuss on these three players, but we have a special announcement here on Cowboys Digest before that. We're looking to grow the team here at Digest Media. We have openings for a couple of different channels in the area. If you're a fan of the Texas Rangers or of the team down south, we've got some openings and you want to break into the sports media industry, this is the perfect opportunity to do it. You can talk about your favorite team on a big platform, thousands of people watching every single day. It's really, really fun. I love my job, and guess what? You could potentially join us here at Digest Media. We've got a link in the description. It's also on your screen right now. Go click that. You got to give us a little bit of information, and who knows, maybe in just a little bit, you could be in my position talking about your favorite team every single day. The Dallas Cowboys have had a roller coaster of a season, as now sit 2-1 on the year. That tie still looms large, at least in my mind, but good positive news from this past week. You got the win, and there were three players who were making a case in that game to have more playing time the rest of the way. We're going to talk about each of those players today. Before we get that, though, do want to go to a quote here from Brian Martin of Blogging with the Boys, kind of talk about why these three players were even needed. You see, quote, "The Dallas Cowboys were severely short-handed last Sunday afternoon against the New York Jets, but fortunately had some of their young, unproven players rise to the occasion and elevate their game when they needed them most," end quote. This is a big thing for the Dallas Cowboys that we have sometimes not seen. I think that loomed large last year. There were injuries, and when the injuries happened, the guys behind him just weren't as well. Now, you lost your quarterback, and you lost a top-tier corner, and there's a lot more of let's say more substantial injuries last year. But at the same time, you're without CeeDee Lamb right now, and because of that trade with George Pickens and Ryan Flournoy playing well, you're doing pretty well. And Ryan Flournoy is our first player we're going to talk about here on the show because he had a fantastic game this past Sunday versus the New York Jets. And from practice squad to active roster to now, I legitimately think it is his wide receiver 3 spot, even fighting with Kevontae Turpin when he comes back. At worst, I think he's wide receiver 4. He's better than Jalen Tolbert, in my opinion, and he showed that this Sunday as he had 6 receptions for 114 yards. By the way, had 100 yards before the first half ended, so if that tells you how much the Cowboys let off the gas in the second half, still ended up winning by a decent margin. Pretty good right there, I would say. He also had 2 carries for 10 rushing yards as well. So, for Flournoy, what exactly happened? Why is this something that just kind of popped up? Well, it's because they needed him, to be honest. If you think about the previous 2 weeks, you think about CeeDee Lamb going down a couple weeks ago against the Bears, George Pickens having a fantastic game against the Green Bay Packers, and Jalen Tolbert also having kind of an underrated game as well. You knew that there was going to have to be some people kind of coming out of the woodworks to make this team better on the wide receiver group, and especially without Kevontae Turpin as well. Ryan Flournoy was the guy they went to, and he played fantastic. Here's Brian Martin of Blogging with the Boys as he says, quote, "He looked very much like the real deal," which shouldn't be all that surprising with the way he played in training camp and preseason. But with the current injuries Dallas has and that they are facing at their wide receiver group, he should continue to see more playing time, and rightfully so, and I 100,000% agree. The injuries are still there. Kevontae Turpin is still going to be a questionable play this upcoming week. We obviously know CeeDee Lamb. The best, I think, is him returning next week. I don't see him having a shot this week, at least by all the reports. He wasn't placed in the IR, but in that case, it's probably going to be 3 weeks and the potential for him to be questionable next week. I still think he might be out for the full 4 weeks. They just didn't decide to place him on injured reserve. But either way you slice it, Ryan Flournoy is going to have a very good, timing here. I do have a question for everybody before we kind of continue here. I want you to name a player that you think doesn't get enough attention for how good they are playing. Get down in the comments. We're going to have an ad rolling. So while you're down there, the ad will be playing. Type your player you think is not getting enough attention for how good they're playing with the Cowboys this season. Okay, let's talk about our next guy, which is Nate Thomas. Now, I am going to fight back on this just a tad. I went off a list from Brian Martin and Blogging with the Boys. Obviously, that's kind of what I based this video off of. But Nate Thomas did play fantastic. I got one of the best Cowboys reporters, ESPN's Todd Archer, who immediately after the game, or during the game actually, said that Nate Thomas is impressive and that he deserved some credit, that he didn't play a snap last season, and he played a very good tackle in the game against the New York Jets. Now, with Nate Thomas, it's kind of an intriguing thing because he could be out there for a decent amount of time. We go to Brian Martin, Blogging with the Boys, who says, quote, with Tyler Guyton sidelined due to a concussion last week against the Jets, Thomas got the start at left tackle and more than held his own. Dallas's 2024 7th-round pick is looking as if he'll play a vital role this year at their swing tackle. But what's funny is he actually might have a little bit more of a role than just swing tackle because of the way the Cowboys are kind of set up with their offensive line. You think about the offensive line that had to roll out there last week. Nate Thomas, who was a 7th rounder, Hakeem Adeniji, a 6th rounder, a UDFA at center, a UDFA at right tackle. Now Terrence Steele is the one starter in all this, and TJ Bass, also a UDFA. And yet they had 180 rushing yards, 37 points, and Dak Prescott, he didn't get sacked once. No need to get sacked there. So really crazy that this offensive line was able to do that. But I did say I was going to push back, and it's this. Because Nate Thomas was the 18th ranked offensive player according to PFF at a 45.9 rating, which was the worst on the entire offense. He played well enough to not allow a sack, but if you look underneath the hood, some problems could start to arise if he continues to play. However, I think he'll be a substantial rotational role. And once again, PFF is not everything. He didn't allow a sack. Let's take the positive. Let's run with it. And let's not kind of look back at the PFF grade's bad. It's something to note, but I think in some ways it can be looked over if you're playing well week in and week out. So I think that's something to note. Let's talk about our third and final player. That, of course, is going to be linebacker Shamar James. So we know Jack Sanborn left the game in the second quarter, I believe, with a concussion. James came in, balled out, like legitimately balled out. He had 15 total tackles. That was the most for the Dallas Cowboys in the entire team by 5. Oh, yeah, and who had 10 right behind him? Oh, yeah, that was Wanya Thomas, the guy who also was coming in off an injury, playing for Malik Hooker instead. We were calling for a lot of Wanya Thomas. As a safety, you don't want that many tackles in some aspects, but I'll kind of pressure that Wanya does blitz a lot, especially with the way that Matt Eberflus runs his defenses. So we'll push back with that. But we're talking about Shamar James, kind of talking about why exactly this was such a good performance. Well, here's a kind of interesting thing and an interesting note from Brian Martin. Quote, Dallas hasn't had a linebacker with that many tackles in a regular season game since Leighton Vander Esch and Sean Lee, who are both former first-round picks. You remember the days of Leighton Vander Esch with that back neck guard. That guy was a dude, a legitimate dude. And the fact that there has not been a player or linebacker that has had that many tackles since him, and it is Shamar James, who is, a 5th rounder, you're thinking this guy is going to be a substantial part of this team moving forward. And I think he deserves it. I mean, we don't know, obviously, with Sanborn. I believe it was a concussion, so we'll see what happens. But I have been underwhelmed with the play of Kenneth Murray Jr. personally. I think in some ways we can kind of maybe slide in Shamar James and play him in a more rotational role. You get 15 tackles, you deserve more playing time. And I know we've had the conversation that sometimes it's not always stats that lead to playing time. But good news is there is going to be a very good linebacking core for this Cowboys moving forward. You've got James, Martise Liafu, and DeMarvion Overshown. The Cowboys are going to have a great, young, promising linebacker core, which is kind of why I believe Sanborn and Kenneth Murray were here and are here right now, especially Kenneth Murray, because they didn't have the linebacker necessities to have them ready to go right now. We also know DeMarvion Overshown is going to play probably more of a Micah Parsons role, I think, in a lot of ways, but could see him at a potential regular linebacker role. Either way you slice it, this linebacker group is going to be very good for the next, 3, 4, 5 years, because you think about the way that they've been developing them. You think about the way that the linebackers throughout the Cowboys organization historically have been developed. You're thinking it's going to be a pretty positive one. If Shamar is going to be playing like this week in, week out, you're going to feel pretty good. So That's all we got for you here on today's show. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Is there somebody I missed? Obviously had that question earlier. Is there a player that you believe has been underrated, hasn't been talked about? I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section. And we'll see you next time here on Cowboys Digest. Peace out, everybody.